We are glad to see you again on our channel. Today we have the recap of the movie Artificial Intelligence, released in 2001. What happens when people invent a robot with emotions like a normal person? That's what we'll see at the end of this movie. Sit comfortably and enjoy watching. In a world where global warming has gotten out of hand and science has reached amazing heights, mortals coexist with complex and fascinating robots. However, when the advanced prototype robot child, named David, was programmed to show selfless love, his human family was not prepared for the consequences of such emotions. David was suddenly alone in a strange and dangerous world. With the help of another robot, David set out to find the secret of his origin. These were the times when glaciers melted under the greenhouse effect, and the oceans overflowed and flooded all coastal cities. Millions of people have moved, the climate has become unpredictable, and hundreds of millions of people have been starving. Developed countries have maintained high standards of living because the government has imposed high birth control. Robots that never required any resources became an important link in the structure of society. Man Professor Hobby performs and tells about robots that they are a perfect likeness of people. He approaches the robot girl and stabs her hand, but the robot feels nothing. The man says that in New Jersey, artificial creatures have achieved perfection. He again comes to the robot, exposes its mechanisms. The man shows that it is a touch robot that reacts to the outside world. He says that his experiments in the direction of electronic signal transmission along the nerve stem fiber can help create an even better robot that will be able to love. The man proposes to create a robot child who will love his parents. 20 months later, Monica Swinton comes to the corporation and reads to the boy who is in a special flask, a book. Dr. Fraser at Cryogenic Institute comes up and greets Henry Swinton. He tells the man that he cares about Monica because the woman has been mourning the death of her son, Martin Swinton, for 5 years. Dr. Fraser says they can't cure the boy yet, but medicine will help Monica. A group of men discuss that it was difficult to find a suitable candidate, but they did. A photo of Henry Swinton appears on the screen. Henry comes home and tells Monica to believe him. He opens the door and the robot boy David enters the room. Monica begins to cry and says that she will not forget her son. She asks her husband if David is the same inside as all the robots because he looks like a real child. Henry tells Monica what they need to do if they want the boy robot to stay with them. The man warns that after activating the robot, his love will also begin to work. And therefore, if the family then decides to give up the robot, he is subject to destruction. In the evening, Monica and Henry tell David to go to bed. Monica does not have much contact with the boy. During the day, he constantly follows the woman and disturbs her. At dinner, David repeats Monica when she eats spaghetti. The boy sharply laughs, but then stops just as abruptly. In the evening, Monica puts David to bed. Monica opens the instructions for activating the program. The woman utters the right words, after which David calls her mother and hugs her. Henry and Monica dress up beautifully and are about to leave. David sprays himself with a woman's perfume and it ends. David asks Monica if she will die sometime. The woman says she will live 50 years. Monica takes out a teddy bear toy from the box and gives it to David. The robot bear meets David. Henry and Monica leave. The phone rings and Monica learns from Henry that Martin can be taken home. Martin and David are talking. The boy asks the robot if David has superpowers. Martin says the robot was made higher than him and he is different from other robots. David says that the first thing he remembered was a bird. The robot draws it. Monica is on a boat reading Martin and David book about Pinocchio. She continues reading the book before they go to bed. David listens to her carefully. At the table, David watches Martin eat and pulls up a plate. The robot bear warns David that he may break. David starts eating and curls up as Martin. Monica and Henry try to stop the boys. David becomes ill. David's being repaired as all his parts are in the food. Martin tells David that if he does a special assignment for him, Martin will tell his mother that he loves the robot and Monica will love him too. Martin asks David to promise, and then he will tell him what to do. David says first to say what is needed. Martin says he needs a strand of his mother's hair. To put it in a medallion like in a fairy tale, Martin says that the robot needs to sneak into Monica's bedroom at night and cut off her strand. David, with scissors, enters the parents' bedroom. David is already leaning over the woman to cut the strand. But Monica and Henry wake up. Henry starts shaking David and asks why he did it. David says he just wanted his mom to love him. Monica tells Henry that it is quite normal that the boys compete with each other because Martin is at home only a month. Monica says that she will not give the robot back. Henry asks his wife to think about what will happen in the future if the robot already has such displays of love. Martin sits by the pool where his friends swim. David comes to the boy with a gift and congratulates him on his birthday. The boys, friends of Martin, touch David and say that he is like real. One of the boys takes a knife and touches David's hand to understand what he feels. David hides behind Martin, talking, "Save me." He holds the boy tightly, and they fall into the pool. Henry pulls Martin out of the water when he is almost not breathing and revives him.
Keep me safe, Martin. Keep me safe. Let me go!
Monica tells David that they need to talk. The woman sees sheets of paper where David writes that he loves her. Monica tells David that tomorrow they will go for a walk outside the city and will take a robot bear. Monica takes David by car. She drives past the corporation sign where they picked up David. Monica in the woods tells David that she must leave him there with the robot bear. Monica says that the corporation will destroy him and therefore it is better for him to stay here. David begins to apologize for all the transgressions. Monica cries and says he's not real. She gives David money and shows him where not to go. Monica pushes the robot away and leaves. Gigolo Joe tells Patricia in Mirrored Room that, having spent the time with a robot lover, the woman no longer wants to be with the man. Gigolo Joe then enters the hotel. The man at the front desk tells him to open the collar so he can see the license, because robots are being captured for destruction. Gigolo Joe enters the room and sees the body of a woman on the bed. She is deprived of life, and she has blood. The man asks Gigolo Joe how long has passed since he last met the victim. David walks through the woods and tells the robot bear that if he becomes a real boy, he can come home and Monica will love him. He says that Pinocchio became real. David sees a big car unloading a huge pile of parts from destroyed robots in the woods. Other robots, without some body parts, find parts in this pile. Suddenly, the moon rises. Someone tells David that there are people from the fair who are destroying robots in the arena. Teddy Robot tells David to run. Motorcyclists start chasing robots. Gigolo Joe is caught in the cage. David and the robot bear are also caught by men. David holds the bear by the paw but drops it. The robot bear comes to the fair and is put in the Bureau of Forgotten Things. David sees one robot in the arena being put into the gun and fired into the fire. The robot bear runs to the cage where David is sitting. The girl takes the bear in her arms. The girl approaches Dad and says that a real boy is sitting in a cage, meaning David. David asks the robots in the cage what is going on here and learns that people are trying to destroy all the robots one by one. Stage manager with a daughter approaches David. Stage manager tells Lord Johnson Johnson that David looks real. David says that he is a boy and says his mother's name. Lord Johnson Johnson says that uniqueness must bring money. He pays stage manager compensation and says he will take David to the show business. David leads Gigolo Joe after himself and does not let go. Lord Johnson Johnson takes David and Gigolo Joe to the arena. He tells viewers that the robot boy is made to melt people's hearts. He says it's worth making the mistake because the robot's creator is obviously gifted, but it all makes sense when he takes off his shell. David starts screaming not to be burned. The audience is bewildered. The woman says that robots usually don't ask for mercy. Lord Johnson Johnson says that the robot mimics human emotion perfectly. Viewers begin throwing things at Lord Johnson Johnson, saying it's just a boy.
Don't burn me! Don't burn me!
Men say Professor Hobby that they found a boy. David and Gigolo Joe walk through the woods. Gigolo Joe asks why David is running away. David says that his mother told him to hide. David says he just needs to find a blue fairy that will turn him into a real boy and then his mother will love him. Gigolo Joe understands that the blue fairy is a woman. He says he knows everything about women. He says that there are many women in the Red City, but it's far away. Gigolo Joe says that to find a fairy, they will ask Dr. No. Gigolo Joe says that David saved his life, and for that, he will make a naked fairy, a real woman, to make David a boy. Gigolo Joe hitches a ride, and they arrive in the Red City. Gigolo Joe shows David establishments and tells him about them. The robot says they have to go to Dr. No because everyone who wants to know something goes to him. Gigolo Joe leads David to Dr. No. Dr. No says to pay. David gives money. David asks where the blue fairy is. Dr. No tells about the plant. The boy asks who the blue fairy is, but again gets the wrong answer. Gigolo Joe then chooses the category of the fairy tale, and finally, David sees the hologram of the fairy. David asks how a robot can become a human. Dr. No says that Professor Hobby studied this question. Dr. Kno says that there is a blue fairy at the end of the world. Gigolo Joe says that many robots went to the end of the world but never returned. Gigolo Joe says that this place is Manhattan. Gigolo Joe tells David that maybe magic doesn't exist. He says that the blue fairy can be a virus to destroy robots. He says that people hate robots. David says that his mother didn't hate him because he was special. He says that his mother will love him when he is real. Gigolo Joe says that she just loves what the robot does, not himself. Gigolo Joe says that David is just an unusual experiment and that's it. And he's lonely because people are tired of him. Gigolo Joe is sure that people hate robots because they will never die. Outside, the police take Gigolo Joe, but David hijacks the helicopter and they fly away. Gigolo Joe and David fly to the lost city on the edge of the earth. Heroes enter the office of Professor Hobby. There is a boy in the chair. He says that he is David. David tells the boy that he is the only one and starts hitting him and smashes his head. Prof. Hobby tells David that he was waiting for him. He says that the boy is as alive as possible. Prof. Hobby says he asked Dr. No to send the boy here to bring him home. Prof. Hobby admires the fact that David, according to the fairy tale, was inspired by the dream and went on a trip for love. Prof. Hobby says that no robots before the boy did so. David says he thought he was the only one. The man corrects the boy and says that he is the first. Professor Hobby says that the team wants to talk to David. David enters a room where he sees many robot boys like him and robot girls. David sits on the edge of the roof and falls into the water. Gigolo Joe sees this. David emerges and tells Gigolo Joe that he has seen a fairy in the ocean. Gigolo Joe is taken away. He asks David to tell the girls about him when the boy is alive.
Remember me to the ladies when you grow up.
David is floating underwater on a helicopter. He finds a blue fairy figure among the figures from Pinocchio's fairy tale. David continued to beg the blue fairy to make him real, and she just smiled impassively. He kept asking her even when the water froze. David himself was frozen forever, but his eyes were always open, looking forward through the darkness of every night. So 2,000 years passed. David woke up and walked up to the blue fairy. Some creatures around him are discussing among themselves that the robot was here before the freezing. They say the robot saw living people. David touches the fairy and she crumbles. The creatures touch David and send him to the fairy. Fairy says David is the only one in the world. The fairy says that Monica is no longer alive. She says that they can recreate people, but they need a part of their bodies. The bear takes out a strand of Monica's hair and gives it to David, and David gives it to the fairy. Professor Hobby, in the form of a creature, tells David that the recreated person lives only a day. David asks to create a mother at least for a day. He spends time with Monica. Before going to bed, Monica tells David that he loves him. David has waited for this moment forever. Monica fell asleep, and David fell asleep with her. At the scene, the movie ends. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, it's time to do it. Whether you like this movie or not, you can write in the comments. That's all for today. We'll see you in the next recaps.